Hello and welcome to Unveiling Reality. How's everybody doing this evening? I'm your host, Winning Reality. So happy to see everybody here tonight. How's it going? T-Rex, first in the chat. Hey, how you doing, T-Rex? T3, always a pleasure. How you doing, ma'am? Rabbit, I love it when you're here. Thank you so much for being here, Rabbit. See me later? Hey, maybe I'll see you later. Hey, thanks for being here, bud. Appreciate it. See, hey, Impish, I knew it. How you doing, man? Hope I pronounced that right. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here, Madcore. The Madcore show is here. All right. Awesome. Jacob Castro, how you doing, bud? Thank you so much for being here, man. Thank you guys so much for being here. I am really excited about this show tonight because we are going to be diving in to a very important topic. In fact, a topic so important for the upcoming elections that this will not be the last show on this topic. I can guarantee you that. This is going to be a show that is going to set up a bunch of other shows. But I want you guys to have the foundation, right? The foundation to understand where I'm coming from on all this, because this topic is so critically important to our future that I can't stress it enough. Take off your shirt. I mean, let's go learn. All right. $10 for talking trash truths. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. All right. But the topic we're going to be talking about. Hey, Daisy, how you doing? Welcome. Let me make sure we are good on Rumble too, because we always are going to be streaming over there on Rumble. Okay, yeah, we got a watch over there. Good. All right. Everybody hit that thumbs up for me, man. Let's fight that YouTube algorithm together, right? Because they don't like it. They don't like it when the small creators do well, right? Yeah, you guys all help that. Hey, Shizzy Wisnut, how you doing? Oh, cool. Thank you so much for sending your stream over here, man. I appreciate that so much. Man, that really helps out a lot. And hey, if you guys didn't know, Shizzy Wisnut made it back safely from Italy. We were a little worried about that, but thanks to his excellent musicianship, I believe the plane was able to land safely. At least I'm just going by what I saw on the news. Oh man. But me and Shizzy are going to be doing a stream this Saturday night. We're going to be going over hippie culture and the origins of the Rainbow Gathering. This is a scene that's highly involved in music, and Shizzy and I have both been musicians. We both are musicians, let me say that. And we both have been on the road, right? And we're doing the same kind of work, and we know a lot of the same kind of people. A lot of the same people. So yeah, I always love having Shizzy on, and we're gonna have a great time on Winning Saturday night. So I hope you guys will be there. It's 9 p.m. Eastern. 9 p.m. Eastern this Saturday night. We're gonna rock and roll. One more Saturday night. Yeah. All right. But back to the topic here. The neoconservatives, right? Now, most of us. I don't believe there's anybody here that was before that time. I think most of us were born into this thing that is called the left-right paradigm, the false left-right paradigm, right? The neoconservatives were a big part of why that false left paradigm existed. And what they were able to do was infiltrate the right, posing as conservatives, the neoconservatives, the new conservatives, right? And then play the heel. So we had most of our lives, we had this false illusion of choice going on, where the left and the right, and you're going to hear this tonight verbatim. It's spoken much better than I can ever say it. But we're going to they have had this illusion of choice, right? So they would toss back the presidency back and forth every 8 years to each other, and they would never change each other's policies, and no one could figure out why. Why were the liberals not acting like liberals, and why were the conservatives not acting like conservatives? And this was a major point in my awakening. This is a major point of why I'm sitting here today, right? Because I, at that time, was looking for answers. And I became curious. And up until this point, I had never, and this is like mid-aughts, right? Mid-aughts. So I was looking for answers. I was a young man trying to figure out what the hell was going on in this world. And I was looking for answers. And two men in my life, mentors in my life, my father and my boss man that I talk about a lot from the road, both turned me on to the idea that the parties were working together, something I had never imagined before in my life because of the big show that was going on, the big wrestling match between the two that was going on and in front of our eyes, the Clintons, the Bushes, right? And then the Obamas, they're all in there, right? Why wasn't anything ever changing, right? Why wasn't anything ever getting better? I couldn't put my finger on it until I came across a man called Ron Paul. Now, Ron Paul was instrumental in helping me understand this difference. And also in letting me know that it really is a different faction of liberty-minded people that are out there trying to do something. And this became the Ron Paul revolution, right? Hey, how you doing, Anno? How you doing? Cool Frog. How you doing, buddy? Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it. Remember to smash that like button. Woo! I'm getting better at trying to remember to say that. But anyways, yeah, they came out and every election we think that something was going to change, and then nothing ever would change. And Ron Paul was really great at pointing this out. And what we're going to watch tonight is probably one of his most famous speeches of all times. Hold on, I think I got a comment here on this from TR. Let me see. TR. Unveiling Reality. Did you see V Radio's stream from earlier? He was talking a bit about how we got here and how the left at Occupy is exactly acting like BLM today. Yeah, absolutely. And shoot, I love V Radio, man. If you guys aren't subscribed to V Radio, please join and subscribe and support V Radio. He's a good friend of mine, and we are brothers in arms here. We may come from different sides. We may have had different experiences, but we align on the fact that it is the establishment versus the anti-establishment. And that's what I want to get through to you. That's what I want to help you see. And this is the topic that'll help you understand why, right? Yeah, but V Radio is doing great work over there. I want to collaborate with him a lot on the things that are going on that affect our children, because he's a father, I'm a father, and he is very strongly attacking the grooming issue, the trans activist issue, all these things, all the words that get me in trouble with YouTube, all those things. Yes. But I don't care, because it's a fight, it's a battle. And just like back in these days, I was fighting hard to get people to realize that there is a difference, and there is a man out there named Ron Paul that would be probably the greatest president we'd ever had up to that point. Very honest, very, very based, very much the father of the rebirth of liberty. And so as we go along, we are going to have many shows that are about Ron Paul and liberty and the works that he did, because the philosophy of liberty, not the libertarian philosophy. I'm talking about the real philosophy of liberty. That's just the base philosophy. That is what's important to understand, because that's what our country is supposed to be about, right? And that's some of the things that we're missing. A lot of kids, most of us didn't grow up understanding the true philosophy of liberty. Now, Ron Paul used his position at the time and his popularity to run for president, probably knowing that it was damn near impossible for him to win. Even Donald Trump at the time said he had no chance of winning, and that didn't go over very well. I didn't like Trump at first because of that. And I felt like he was probably helping the establishment at that point. I just came to realize later on he's brutally honest, and he knew some things that we came to find out later. So we got tons of stories about the Ron Paul days, about what happened with the delegates, what happened with the GOP. And this story is going to build and build and build as we go along to the upcoming elections, and why it is so important for us to never, ever, ever let the neocons get control of the GOP again. Now, it may be painful for some people to hear this or realize that they may have to vote for somebody they might not like personally, but it's the best thing to do, because we can never give them the GOP back. We've worked for 2 different runs at president with Ron Paul to try to take that party away from the neocons, because we saw the false left paradigm. Now, the people in the first veil, let me pull up the retrospective here so we can take a look at it while we talk, right? And I can click around and get everybody confused. That's what I do. All right, let me pull it up here real quick so we can talk alongside of it. We don't need that. We just need this. Okay. Come on up here, retrospective. Let's talk. All right, here we are. Okay. And this is where we're at tonight. The false left paradigm right here. Okay. So, like I said, the people in the first veil are stuck in this idea that this false left paradigm is real. Part of breaking out of this first veil is understanding this concept that, yes, it does happen. Someone can game the system. And what they do is they, hey, where am I at? Let me just, let me do this. Let me get over here where I'm not making a mess. And no, let's do it this way. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do it this way. So when you realize that the left and the right have been working together behind the scenes, so as we were fighting about who was a better president, Clinton or Bush or Obama or Bush or whatever, they all were corrupt. To me, they were all just as bad as each other. They were partying together. They were having a good time. They were out, as I like to say, well, I won't say it on here, but they were out kissing each other's naughty parts while we were sitting there fighting about which one of them are, losing friendships over which one of them were right or wrong and which one is, the bad guys and who's the good guys. It's just like a wrestling match. It was just like the faces versus the heels. And I began to see through this illusion. And that's when my journey to the second veil began, because I realized that this entire thing had been an illusion. We already knew about the corruption of the establishment media, right? We already knew about that. That was becoming very obvious with the way things were going, especially in the Obama days. But, we also knew the power of lobbyists and activists, right? We knew that that Marxist ideas had infiltrated into our school systems, and people have begun to favor Marxism over this basic Americanism, as Yuri would say, the philosophy of liberty, which Ron Paul brought back to us. That's why he's so important. And it's my pleasure tonight to bring you one of the most famous speeches he ever made. We will watch a lot more of his speeches because as I talk about the philosophy of liberty as part of our solution culture, getting the philosophy of liberty back into schools. And here we are over here on the, of course, we know we exist over here in the fifth veil, right? They don't know we're coming. We're right here. But Ron Paul's philosophy of liberty will be covered deeply. And we will go through that education process again to help you and all of us understand how to go out and speak about liberty, how to get people excited about liberty and owning their own lives, right? That doesn't mean that we don't need any government. I haven't gotten to that point where I believe that there is any way to function without some kind of government in this day and age, right? If it ain't just here, it's everywhere else. Just kind of like the alphabet agencies, right? They're corrupt. We know that. We know that there's some serious problems with it, but there are alphabet agencies in every other country doing the same thing. So how do you counter that? We'll get to that later. But tonight is about the neocons, and we're going to watch a speech called Neoconned. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. There we go. All right. We're going to watch a speech called Neoconned, which was extremely famous back in the Ron Paul days. I must have played this and sent this to people many, many times. Now, I want you to keep this in context. This speech was let me get it right. Hopefully it was on C-SPAN. It was in 2003. We're going back to 2003. Remember that? Remember those days? It was before everybody was racist and sexist. Yes. It was before everybody was transphobic and all these other great things we have today. Yes. It was before the isms arose. Back then, I guess the best you could be was anti-Semitic. Yeah, that all changed. We'll get to that later. But let me go ahead and pull it up and just let you know that this is coming from that context. So some of the names you're going to hear, you'll recognize maybe, but a lot of these have now been sidelined. And this is a very good thing for our country. When this happened, it helped a lot. In fact, I could remember feeling so much better and so much easier about things when I realized this. And I'm thinking to myself now, should I read this first or not? Let me see. Neocon definition. Okay, so I pulled up a bunch of my old notes today from way back in those days when I was out and about pounding and yelling about this to my friends, and trying to get my friends to realize it was okay to vote for Republican and okay to vote for Ron Paul. And I'll dive in that a little bit deeper, but I want to get to the definitions here. So here's what I wrote way back then. This is probably coming from about 2010, 2011-ish, maybe. So here's what I wrote. At the core, both controlling parties agree on everything because they are the same party. What we see is a big show. Neocon Republicans, the dominant sect since the 70s, and I'll explain how they kind of came on in if Ron Paul doesn't do it for me here, and Democrats. Remember the radical left? Where did those guys go? Well, they're still out there, right? But, the ones who supported all the Democratic principles of big government, debt spending, federal oversight into all aspects of our lives, I need to word wrap this. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Income tax and the Fed, but with the radical methodologies of like preemptive war and the ends justify the mean, which are very neocon concepts, which of course my audience, very smart, already has learned comes from this more Marxist implementation that came prior to that. So the thing about you have to understand about neocons is they are still rooted in Marxism. It's this Trotsky version of it, right? So they had the Trotskyites moved on into our country, and they actually went on to become the neoconservatives. A very interesting tale. You wouldn't think that those guys sitting up there saying they're neocons like George Bush and so on, that they actually their core ideology was rooted in Trotskyism, if you will, like Leninism, right? Lenin and Trotsky had a battle for control. Lenin obviously won, but that's what it was. So we can clamor on and on about issues, but until people realize they've been had, it's all pointless distractions because we really have no say in any of it. The netless tennis match is for our entertainment, and they're to distract us from seeing and accepting the truth about who stole our country and how it happened. Lead candidates for the Neo-Republican Democrat Party, that's what I was calling it at the time, evidently, won't talk about the root causes of our current situation because they'd be called out. They'd be calling out the hands that feed them. So listen, this is me talking 10 years ago. It sounds like today, doesn't it? It's crazy when I read this back, like what I was talking about. How many decades are going to pass before most Americans understand this simple fact? Fearful assumptive minds is the roadblock to change. We can only hope that most people figure this out before the next election, so real candidates have a chance next time. Like Ron Paul, who has done nothing but speak openly and honestly about the real core root cause issues of our country while courageously calling game on neocon Republicans and Democrats alike. Ron Paul has some surprising news for the Tea Party. You're all being taken for a ride. That's Ron Paul, direct quote about the Tea Party at the time. Because, the Tea Party got infiltrated and it got all mushed up with a bunch of people that would make it unsavory for most, right? At least this is what many libertarians like Ron Paul believe when they see someone like Glenn Beck or Sarah Palin trying to lead the Tea Party at the Restoring Honor rally this weekend. In fact, Ron Paul believes if you're looking for real freedom, you should really go back to the core of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which Beck and Palin do not fully endorse when you really look at their beliefs. Whether it's Palin's support for starting more wars or Beck's belief on paying the private Federal Reserve more interest on our money by means of the VAT tax, Ron Paul believes in neither of the above. While the Tea Party will be out supporting Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin this weekend, you wonder how many of them will be in full support of more wars and paying more interest to a group of untouchables and unauditable private bankers, otherwise known as the Fed. This is precisely why Ron Paul is asking the American public to consider what Ron Paul is asking the American public to consider when looking at the Tea Party leaders and see if they really stand for what they believe in. At the core, both parties, yes, I was long-winded back then. At the core, both controlling parties agree on everything because they are the same party. What we see is a big show. Okay, I think I'm repeating myself here. Because I'm cutting and pasting this. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's just a double cut. So that's what I had to say way back then. I hope you guys enjoyed that little blast from the past there. What are you guys saying in the chat? Let me. Bush and Clintons are meeting Colorado for years. Yeah. They take vacations together. They love each other. Hillary's my sister. That's what George Bush said. She's like my sister. Now, how do you go out in front of a bunch of people that have been fighting over this for years, the bases, and keep the base after saying that? To the point where people would rather have Jeb Bush than Donald Trump. What the hell was wrong with you? I'm not a father, but I have known many mothers. Okay. Yes, you have. Yes, you have, Mr. Shiz. Yes, you have. Okay. Let me see what else we got. My eyes are burning. Education. Yep. Education. Winning Bobs. What? So see your tan. What are you guys talking about? Winning Bobs and Weaves. and knocks chicks out with one shot. All day. What are you talking about? You guys are crazy tonight. Let's go. Let's go. Keep the chatter going, man. I love seeing all the activity in chat. It's great. What's going on over there on okay, we got 6 watching on the Rumble side. Thank you guys for being here. Make sure you smash the thumbs up and the like button here on the YouTube side. So let's get this thing going, all right? Let's get this thing going. Let me pull this on up. I'm going to sit down here in the corner and watch with you. But we're going to start this out. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado. Oh, thank you, Tweety. I was like, I got other stuff too. I found this whole database of things I had written back in the day. Now, back in the day, I was writing instead of talking, right? So we'll go over some of that stuff. I have to go refresh myself on this stuff and remember what it was. But good thing I saved it. And I also found some old documentaries that I saved too that we can watch. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. We'll go over those. Maybe some Winning Saturday Nights. Maybe some Unveiling Reality shows. This I like to really target in on, and the Saturday night show I like to kind of keep it loose. Maybe we do this, maybe we do that. Maybe it's a couple different things that night, right? So, anyways, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of the most famous speeches of all time that Ron Paul ever gave, Neoconned.
Policy of January 7, 2003. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Paul, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the majority leader.
Hi, Caitlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the modern day limited government movement has been co-opted. The conservatives have failed in their effort to shrink the size of government. There has not been, nor will there soon be, a conservative revolution in Washington. Party control of the federal government has changed, but the inexorable growth in the size and scope of government has continued unabated. The liberal arguments for limited government in personal affairs and foreign military adventurism were never seriously considered as part of this revolution. Since the change of the political party in charge has not made a difference, who's really in charge? If the particular...
That right there is one of his most famous lines. Think about what he's saying right there. If when the political party changes, nothing else does, who's calling the shots? Who's really in charge?
Party in power makes little difference. Whose policy is it that permits expanded government programs, increased spending, huge deficits, nation building, and the pervasive invasion of our privacy with fewer Fourth Amendment protections than ever before? Someone is responsible, and it's important for those of us who love liberty and resent big brother government, identify the philosophic supporters who have the most to say about the direction our country is going. If they're wrong, and I believe they are, we need to show it, alert the American people, and offer a more positive approach to government. However, this depends on whether the American people desire to live in a free society and reject the dangerous notion that we need a strong central government to take care of us from cradle to grave. Do the American people really believe it's the government's responsibility to make us morally better and economically equal? Do we have a responsibility to police the world while imposing our vision of good government on everyone else in the world with some form of utopian nation building? If not, and the contemporary enemies of liberty are exposed and rejected, then it behooves us to present an alternative philosophy that is morally superior and economically sound and provides a guide to world affairs to enhance peace and commerce. One thing is certain, conservatives who worked and voted for less government in the Reagan years and welcomed the takeover of the U.S. Congress and the presidency in the 1990s and early 2000s were deceived. Soon they will realize that the goal of limited government has been dashed and that their views no longer matter. The so-called conservative revolution of the past 2 decades has given us massive growth in government size, spending, and regulations. Deficits are exploding, and the national debt is now rising at a greater than $500 billion per year. Taxes do not go down, even if we vote to lower them. They can't, as long as spending is increased, since all spending must be paid for one way or another. Both Presidents Reagan and the elder George Bush raised taxes directly. With this administration so far, direct taxes have been reduced, and they certainly should have been. But it means little if spending increases and deficits rise. When taxes are not raised to accommodate higher spending, the bills must be paid for by either borrowing or printing new money. This is one reason why we conveniently have a generous Federal Reserve chairman who is willing to accommodate the Congress. With borrowing and inflating, the tax is delayed and distributed in a way that makes it difficult for those paying the tax to identify it. Like future generations and those on fixed incomes who suffer from rising prices and those who lose jobs, they certainly feel the consequence of economic dislocation that this process causes. Government spending is always a tax burden on the American people and is never equally or fairly distributed. The poor and low middle income workers always suffer the most from the deceitful tax of inflation and borrowing. Many present-day conservatives who generally argue for less government and supported the Reagan, Gingrich, Bush takeover of the federal government are now justifiably disillusioned. Although not a monolithic group, they wanted to shrink the size of government. Early in our history, the advocates of limited constitutional government recognized two important principles. The rule of law was crucial, and a constitutional government must derive just powers from the consent of the governed. It was understood that an explicit transfer of power to government could only occur with power rightfully and naturally endowed to each individual as a God-given right. Therefore, the powers that could be transferred would be limited to the purpose of protecting liberty. Unfortunately, in the last 100 years, the defense of liberty has been fragmented and shared by various groups, with some protecting civil liberties, others economic freedom, and a small, diverse group arguing for a foreign policy of non-intervention. The philosophy of freedom has had a tough go of it, and it was hoped that the renewed interest in limited government of the past 2 decades would revive an interest in reconstituting the freedom philosophy into something more consistent. Those who worked for the goal of limited government power believed the rhetoric of politicians who promised smaller government. Sometimes it was just plain sloppy thinking on their part, but at other times they fell victim to a deliberate distortion of a concise limited government philosophy by politicians who misled many into believing that we would see a rollback on government intrusiveness. Yes, there was always a remnant who longed for truly limited government and maintained a belief in the rule of law, combined with a deep conviction that free people and a government bound by a constitution were the most advantageous form of government. They recognized it as the only practical way for prosperity to be spread to the maximum number of people while promoting peace and security. That remnant, imperfect as it may have been, was heard from in the elections of 1980, 1994, and then achieved major victories in 2000 and 2002, when professed limited government proponents took over the administration, the Senate, and the House. However, the true believers in limited government are now shunned and laughed at. At the very least, they are ignored, except when they are used by the new leaders of the right, the new conservatives now in charge of the U.S. government. The remnant's instincts were correct.
I just want to say apologies. I'm so used to like thinking of the left as fake that I actually mistitled this. It's the history of the fake right. So I apologize. I'm making the corrections now. I just wanted to call myself out for going too fast and not reading properly. There we go.
And the politicians placated them with talk of free markets, limited government, and a humble non-nation building foreign policy. However, little concern for civil liberties was expressed in this recent quest for less government. Yet, for an ultimate victory of achieving freedom, this must change. Interest in personal privacy and choices has generally remained outside the concern of many conservatives, especially with the great harm done by their long-time support of the drug war. Even though some confusion has emerged over our foreign policy since the breakdown of the Soviet Union, it's been a net benefit in getting some conservatives back on track with a less militaristic interventionist foreign policy. Unfortunately, though, after 9/11, the cause of liberty suffered a setback. As a result, millions of Americans voted for the less than perfect conservative revolution because they believed in the promises of the politicians. Now, there's mounting evidence to indicate exactly what happened to the revolution. Government is bigger than ever, and future commitments are overwhelming. Millions will soon become disenchanted with the new status quo delivered to the American people by the advocates of limited government, and will find it to be just more of the old status quo. Victories for limited government have turned out to be hollow indeed. Since the national debt is increasing at a rate greater than $500 billion per year, the debt limit was recently increased by an astounding $984 billion. Total U.S. government obligations are $43 billion, while total net worth of all U.S. households is just over $44 trillion. The country is broke, but no one in Washington seems to notice or care. The philosophic and political commitment for both guns and butter, and especially the expanding American empire, must be challenged. This is crucial for our survival. In spite of the floundering economy, the Congress and the administration continues to take on new commitments in foreign aid, education, farming, medicine, multiple efforts at nation building, and preemptive wars around the world. Already, we're entrenched in Iraq and Afghanistan with plans to soon add new trophies to our conquest. War talk abounds as to when Syria, Iran, and North Korea may be attacked. How did this all transpire? Why did the government do it? Why haven't the people objected? How long will it go on before something is done? Does anyone care? With the euphoria of grand military victories against non-enemies ever be mellowed? Someday, we as a legislative body must face the reality, the dire situation in which we have allowed ourselves to become enmeshed. Hopefully, it will be soon. We got here because ideas do have consequences. Bad ideas have bad consequences. And even the best of intentions have unintended consequences. We need to know exactly what the philosophic ideas were that drove us to this point, then hopefully reject them and decide on another set of intellectual parameters. There is abundant evidence exposing those who drive our foreign policy, justifying preemptive war. Those who scheme are proud of their achievements in usurping control over foreign policy. These are the neoconservatives of recent fame. Granted, they are talented and achieved a political victory that all policymakers must admire. But can freedom and the republic survive this takeover? That question should concern us. Neoconservatives are obviously in positions of influence and are well placed throughout our government and the media. An apathetic Congress put up little resistance and abdicated its responsibility over foreign affairs. The electorate was easily influenced to join in the patriotic fervor supporting the military adventurism advocated by the neoconservatives. The numbers of those who still hope for truly limited government diminished and had their concerns ignored these past 22 months during the aftermath of 9/11. Members of Congress were easily influenced to publicly support any domestic policy or foreign military adventure that was supposed to help reduce the threat of a terrorist attack. Believers in limited government were harder to find. Political money, as usual, played a role in pressing Congress into supporting almost any proposal suggested by the neoconservatives. This process, where campaign dollars and lobbying efforts affect policy, is hardly the domain of any single party, and unfortunately is the way of life in Washington. There are many reasons why government continues to grow. It would be naive for anyone to expect otherwise. Since 9/11, protection of privacy, whether medical, personal, or financial, has vanished. Free speech and the Fourth Amendment have been under constant attack. Higher welfare expenditures are endorsed by the leadership of both parties. Policing the world and nation-building issues are popular campaign targets, yet they are now standard operating procedures here in Washington. There's no sign that these programs will be slowed or reversed until either we are stopped by force overseas, which won't be soon, or we go broke and can no longer afford these grandiose plans for a world empire, which will probably come sooner than later. None of this happened by accident or coincidence. Precise philosophic ideas prompted certain individuals to gain influence to implement these plans. The neoconservatives, a name they gave themselves, diligently worked their way into positions of power and influence. They documented their goals, strategy, and moral justification for all they hoped to accomplish. Above all else, they were not and are not conservatives dedicated to limited constitutional government.
Real quick, think about this. Hold on, let me do the thing here. Think about this. How many people do you know just blab out the word conservative with, George Bush, Jeb Bush, Mitt Romney, John McCain, all these other guys in mind, right? This is mind control, right? Their narrative has been crafted by the terminology. That's why we talk about how powerful the control of language is, right? That's the battle I was fighting back then, to try to get people out of that box and help them understand that who they thought the Republicans were and who they thought conservatives was a lie. And that's a very hard pill for people to swallow. Talk about belief systems, right? And how hard belief systems are to change. Well, it's even harder to change a false belief system because more people deflect into denial so much quicker, right? You ever feel like you're talking to a wall when you're talking to someone on the left or someone who's very first veil thinking, right? It almost seems impossible to get through to them when you're just trying to reach them and have a conversation. It is it's very difficult. This is the kind of battles I was in a daily basis back then, trying to get this information to just for people to consider. Just consider this, please. Just watch it with me. Consider it. Give it a look. I care about you. Please give it a look. Very difficult. No. They would never vote for a Republican. Never. Right? Even though there's this guy named Ron Paul out there speaking truth, speaking to them, speaking the type of life they really want, right? Really want. And, the name itself, Republican, had been so grinded into their mind as these heartless fundamentalist Christian people of all sorts that just wanted to control you and wanted to force things on you and just wanted to give all the money to the rich people and fuck the poor people and all the other shit. This is the kind of shit that was going on in the media back then, constantly conditioning, along with these neocons who played the heels like perfectly well, setting a whole generation askew. That's what we're talking about here. I'll let Ron Paul get back to it, but I just wanted to let you guys kind of like fill in that point right there, that this is a very powerful thing that was going on, and trying to get through to people that these people had infiltrated the party a long time ago to pretend to be conservative was extremely difficult at the time. I have such higher hopes these days because people are so much more open-minded to this idea. And that has a lot to do with the Ron Paul revolution and MAGA, It really does. It went for those two back-to-back campaigns. Yeah, right, sis. That's what I'm talking about, man. If it wasn't for those two back-to-back campaigns, I don't know where we'd be now. This is why I'm going to stress again the importance of hanging on to the GOP. We can never let the neocons take it again.
Neoconservatism has been around for decades and strangely has connections to past generations as far back as Machiavelli. Modern day neoconservatism was introduced to us in the 1960s. It entails both a detailed strategy as well as a philosophy of government. The ideas of Teddy Roosevelt and certainly Woodrow Wilson were quite similar to many of the views of the present day neocons. Neocon spokesman Max Boot brags that what he advocates is, quote, hard Wilsonianism, close quote. In many ways, there's nothing neo about their views, and certainly nothing conservative. Yet they have been able to co-opt the conservative movement by advertising themselves as a new or modern form of conservatism. More recently, the modern-day neocons have come from the far left, a group historically identified as former Trotskyites. Liberal Christopher Hitchens has just recently joined the neocons, and it has been reported that he has already been to the White House as an ad hoc consultant. Many neocons now in position of influence in Washington can trace their status back to Professor Leo Strauss of the University of Chicago. One of Strauss's books was Thoughts on Machiavelli. This book was not a condemnation of Machiavelli's philosophy. Paul Wolfowitz actually got his PhD under Strauss. Others closely associated with these views are Richard Pearl, Elliot Abrams, Robert Kagan, William Crystal. All are key players in designing our new strategy of preemptive war. Others include Michael Ledeen of the American Enterprise Institute, former CIA Director James Woolsey, Bill Bennett of Book of Virtue fame, Frank Gaffney, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld. There are just too many to mention who are philosophically or politically connected to the neocon philosophy in some varying degree. The godfather of modern-day neoconservatism is considered to be Irving Kristol, father of Bill Kristol, who set the stage in 1983 with his publication, Reflections of a Neoconservative. In this book, Kristol also defends the traditional liberal position on welfare. More important than the names of people affiliated with neoconservatism are the views they adhere to. Here is a brief summary of the general understanding of what neocons believe. They agree with Trotsky on permanent revolution, violent as well as intellectual. They are for redrawing the map of the Middle East and are willing to use force to do it. They believe in preemptive war to achieve desired ends. They accept the notion that the ends justify the means, that hardball politics is a moral necessity. They express no opposition to the welfare state. They are not bashful about an American empire. Instead, they strongly endorse it. They believe lying is necessary for the state to survive. They believe a powerful federal government is a benefit. They believe pertinent facts about how a society should be run should be held by the elite and withheld from those who do not have the courage to deal with it. They believe neutrality in foreign affairs is ill-advised. They hold Leo Strauss in high esteem. They believe imperialism, if progressive in nature, is appropriate. Using American might to force American ideals on others is acceptable. Force should not be limited to the defense of our country. 9/11 resulted from the lack of foreign entanglements, not from too many. They dislike and despise libertarians. Therefore, the same applies to all strict constitutionalists. They endorse attacks on civil liberties, such as those found in the Patriot Act, as being necessary. They unconditionally support Israel and have a close alliance with the Likud party. Various organizations and publications over the past 30 years have played a significant role in the rise to power of the neoconservatives. It took plenty of money and commitment.
I'll take that out, Grim, definitely. For sure, for sure. I just wanted to say that all these things he's listing off don't sound very conservative, do they? Yet that's what's been pinned on the GOP as a result of this neocon takeover. Now we'll talk about the history of that in a little bit and how I believe that they came into power. But I'll show you the path that they took in and the people that they implemented when they implemented them and how that grew into their dynasty. That Trump then came in like a raging bull and smashed to pieces.
Commitment to produce the intellectual arguments needed to convince the many participants in the movement of its respectability. It's no secret, especially after the rash of research and articles written about the neocons since our invasion of Iraq, how they gained influence and what organizations were used to promote their cause. Although for decades they agitated for their beliefs through publications like the National Review, the Weekly Standard, the Public Interest, the Wall Street Journal, Commentary, and the New York Post, their views only gained momentum in the 1990s following the first Persian Gulf War, which still has not ended even with the removal of Saddam Hussein. They became convinced that a much more militant approach to resolving all the conflicts of the Middle East was an absolute necessity, and they were determined to implement that policy. In addition to publications, multiple think tanks and projects were created to promote their agenda. A product of the Bradley Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute led the neocon charge, but the real push for war came from the Project for a New American Century, another organization helped by the Bradley Foundation. This occurred in 1998 and was chaired by Weekly Standard editor Bill Kristol. They urged early on for war against Iraq, but were disappointed with the Clinton administration, which never followed through with its periodic bombings. Obviously, those bombings were motivated more by Clinton's personal and political problems than a belief in the neocon agenda. The election of 2000 changed all that. The Defense Policy Board, chaired by Richard Pearl, played no small role in coordinating the various projects and think tanks, all determined to take us to war against Iraq. It wasn't too long before the dream of empire was brought closer to reality by the election of 2000, with Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld playing key roles in this accomplishment. The plan to promote an American greatness, imperialistic foreign policy was now a distinct possibility. Iraq offered a great opportunity to prove their long-held theories. This opportunity was a consequence of the 9/11 disaster. The money and views of Rupert Murdoch also played a key role in promoting the neocon views, as well as rallying support by the general population through his News Corporation, which owns Fox News Network, the New York Post, and Weekly Standard.
That's what I've always said, man. People would look at Fox News and be like, "Oh, this is good news. Watch this. This is the alternative to the left news." I still consider them part of the establishment media because they were playing the part of the mouthpiece for the neoconservatives, and that's been my impression of Fox News. Throughout. Yes, they seemed to be very supportive of Trump at the time. During that time, but they were I felt like they were playing a role the entire time. Like they were just kind of playing along to get people to view them, right? And listen to what they had to say. And then what do we see at the election time, right? We saw them completely pivot back towards their old ways, right? We all saw it happen. That's why I was at the time shouting, "Here comes the neocons trying to take the party back." Right? They're trying to regain their power. They are not going to stop people. I'm telling you, I've been going against these guys for a long time. They will not stop. They've just been sitting there biding their time. And I'll add this: when during the days of the Ron Paul revolution, I said this. I said, if Ron Paul was to get the nomination, you will see the neoconservatives all run back to the left where they came from. So what do we see when Trump did what Ron Paul was not able to accomplish at that time? We saw all of them run right back to the left, didn't we? Yeah, I've been saying that for over 10 years, and boom, they made me right. They made me right.
This powerful and influential media empire did more to galvanize public support for the Iraqi invasion than one might imagine. This facilitated the Rumsfeld-Cheney policy as their plans to attack Iraq came to fruition. It would have been difficult for the neocons to usurp foreign policy from the restraints of Colin Powell's State Department without the successful agitation of the Rupert Murdoch empire. Max Boot was satisfied as he explained, quote, neoconservatives believe in using American might to promote American ideals abroad, close quote. This attitude is a far cry from the advice of the founders who advocated no entangling alliances and neutrality as the proper goal of American foreign policy. Let there be no doubt, those in the neocon camp had been anxious to go to war against Iraq for a decade. They justified the use of force to accomplish their goals, even if it required preemptive war. If anyone doubts this assertion, they need only read of their strategy in A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm. Although they felt morally justified in changing the government in Iraq, they knew that public support was important and justification had to be given to pursue the war. Of course, a threat to us had to exist before the people and the Congress would go along with war. The majority of Americans became convinced of this threat, which in actuality never really existed. Now we have the ongoing debate over the location of weapons of mass destruction. Where was the danger? Was all this killing and spending necessary? How long will this nation building and dying go on? When will we become more concerned about the needs of our own citizens than the problems we sought in Iraq and Afghanistan? Who knows where we'll go next? Iran, Syria, North Korea. At the end of the Cold War, the neoconservatives realized a rearrangement of the world was occurring and that our superior economic and military power offered them a perfect opportunity to control the process of remaking the Middle East. It was recognized that a new era was upon us, and the neocons welcomed Francis Fukuyama's end of history declaration. To them, the debate was over. The West won, the Soviets lost, old-fashioned communism was dead. Long live the new era of neoconservatism. The struggle may not be over, but the West won the intellectual fight, they reason. The only problem is that the neocons decided to define the philosophy of the victors. They have been amazingly successful in their efforts to control the debate over what Western values are and by what methods they will be spread throughout the world. Communism surely lost a lot with the breakup of the Soviet Empire, but this can hardly be declared a victory for American liberty as the founders understood it. Neoconservatism is not the philosophy of free markets and a wise foreign policy. Instead, it represents big government welfare at home and a program of using our military might to spread their version of American values throughout the world. Since neoconservatives dominate the way the U.S. government now operates, it behooves us all to understand their beliefs and goals. The breakup of the Soviet system may well have been an epic event, but to say that the views of the neocons are the unchallenged victors and that all we need to is to wait for their implementation is a capitulation to the controlling of the forces of history that many Americans are not yet ready to concede. There is surely no need to do so. There is now a recognized philosophic connection between modern-day neoconservatives and Irving Kristol, Leo Strauss, and Machiavelli. This is important in understanding that today's policies and the subsequent problems will be with us for years to come if these policies are not reversed. Not only did Leo Strauss write favorably of Machiavelli, Michael Ledeen, a current leader of the neoconservative movement, did the same in 1999 in his book with the title, Machiavelli on Modern Leadership, Why Machiavelli Iron Rules Are as Timely and Important Today as 5 centuries ago. Ledeen is indeed an influential neocon theorist whose views get a lot of attention today in Washington. His book on Machiavelli interestingly enough, was passed out to members of Congress attending a political strategy meeting shortly after its publication, and at just about the same time, a clean break was issued. In Ledine's most recent publication, The War Against the Terror Masters, he reiterates his beliefs he outlined in 1999. He specifically praises, quote, creative destruction, both within our society and abroad. Foreigners seeing America undo traditional societies may fear us, for they do not wish to be undone. Amazingly, Ledine continues, they must attack us in order to survive, just as we must destroy them to advance our historic mission, close quote. If those words don't scare you, nothing will. If they are not a clear warning, I don't know what could be. It sounds like both sides of each disagreement in the world will be following the principles of preemptive war. The world is certainly a less safe place for it. In Machiavelli on Modern Leadership, Ledine praises a business leader for correctly understanding Machiavelli. Quote, there are no absolute solutions. It all depends. What is right and what is wrong depends on what needs to be done and how. Close quote. This is a clear endorsement of situation ethics and is not coming from the traditional left. It reminds me of, it depends on what the definition of the word is. Ledine quotes Machiavelli approvingly on what makes a great leader. Quote, a prince must have no other objectives or other thoughts or take anything for his craft except war. To Ledine, this meant, quote, the virtue of the warrior are those of great leaders of any successful organization. It's obvious that, and that's close quote, it's obvious that war is not coincidental to neocon philosophy, but an integral part. The intellectuals justify it and the politicians carry it out. There's a precise reason to argue for war over peace, according to Ledine. For, quote, peace increases our peril by making discipline less urgent, encouraging some of our worst instincts, and depriving us of some of our best leaders. Peace, he claims, is a dream and not even a pleasant one, for it would cause indolence and would undermine the power of the state. Close quote. Although I concede the history of the world is a history of frequent war, to capitulate and give up even striving for peace, believing peace is not a benefit to mankind, is a frightening thought that condemns the world to perpetual war and justifies it as a benefit and necessity. These are dangerous ideas from which no good can come. The conflict of the ages has been between the state and the individual. Central power versus liberty. The more restrained the state and the more emphasis on individual liberty, the greater has been the advancement of civilization and general prosperity. Just as man's condition was not locked in place by the times and wars of old and improved with liberty and free markets, there's no reason to believe a new stage for man might not be achieved by believing and working for conditions of peace. The inevitability and so-called need for preemptive war should never be intellectually justified as being a benefit. Such an attitude guarantees the backsliding of civilization. Neocons unfortunately claim that war is in man's nature and that we can't do much about it. So let's use it to our advantage by promoting our goodness around the world through force of arms. That view is anathema to the cause of liberty and the preservation of the Constitution. If it is not loudly refuted, our future will be dire indeed. Ledine believes man is basically evil and cannot be left to his own desires. Therefore, he must have proper and strong leadership, just as Machiavelli argued. Only then can man achieve good, as Ledine explains, quote, in order to achieve the most noble accomplishment, the leader may have to enter into evil. This is the chilling insight that has made Machiavelli so feared, admired, and challenging. We are rotten. It's true that we can achieve greatness if and only if we are properly led. Close quote. In other words, man is so depraved that individuals are incapable of moral, ethical, and spiritual greatness, and achieving excellence and virtue can only come from a powerful authoritarian leader. What depraved ideas are these to now be influencing our leaders in Washington? The question Ledeen doesn't answer is, why do the political leaders not suffer from the same shortcomings, and where do they obtain their monopoly on wisdom? Once this trust is placed in the hands of a powerful leader, this neocon argues that certain tools are permissible to use. For instance, quote, this is what Ledeen says, quote, lying is central to the survival of nations and to the success of great enterprises. Because if our enemies can count on the reliability of everything you say, your vulnerability is enormously increased. Close.
So they're basically saying that, lying is okay, and that, that's the benefit is that you're misleading your enemies there, right? Well, I think Ron Paul will go on to say that, well, if you don't create the enemies, you don't need to lie, right? That would probably be his approach to this. But I just want to point that out that, the media and the politicians, we all know that they've been snow jobbing us for a long time, right? But, to know that it's a core part of their philosophy, I think might be surprising to some people.
Close quote. What about the effects of lying on one's own people? Who cares if a leader can fool the enemy? Does calling it strategic deception make lying morally justifiable? Ledeen and Machiavelli argue that it does, as long as the survivability of the state is at stake. Preserving the state is their goal, even if personal liberty of all individuals has to be suspended or canceled. Ledeen makes it clear that war is necessary to establish national boundaries, because that's the way it's always been done. Who needs progress of the human race? He explains, quote, look at the map of the world. National boundaries have not been drawn by peaceful men leading lives of spiritual contemplation. National boundaries have been established by war, and national character has been shaped by struggle, most often bloody struggle, close quote. Yes, but who is to lead the charge and decide which borders we are to fight for? What about the borders 6,000 miles away, unrelated to our own contiguous borders and our own national security? Stating a relative truism regarding the frequency of war throughout history should hardly be the moral justification for expanding the concept of war to settle man's disputes. How can one call this progress? Machiavelli, Ledeen, and the Neocons recognized a need to generate a religious zeal for promoting the state. This, he claims, is especially necessary when force is used to promote an agenda. It's been true throughout history and remains true today. Each side of major conflicts invoke God's approval. Our side refers to a crusade, theirs to a holy jihad. Too many wars boil down to their God against our God. It seems this principle is more a cynical effort to gain approval from the masses, especially those most likely to be killed for the sake of the war promoters on both sides who have power, prestige, and wealth at stake. Ledeen explains why God must always be on the side of the advocates of war. Quote, without fear of God, no state can last long, for the dread of eternal damnation keeps men in line, causes them to honor their promises, and inspires them to risk their lives for the common good. Close quote. It seems dying for the common good has gained a higher moral status than eternal salvation of one's soul. He goes on to say, quote, without fear of punishment, men will not obey laws that force them to act contrary to their passions. Without fear of arms, the state cannot enforce the laws. To this end, Machiavelli wants leaders to make the state spectacular. It's of interest to note that some large Christian denominations have joined the neoconservatives in promoting preemptive war, while completely ignoring the Christian doctrine of a just war. The neocons saw and openly welcomed their support. I'd like someone to glean anything from what the founders said or placed in the Constitution that agrees with this now professed doctrine of a spectacular state. promoted by those who now have so much influence on our policies here at home and abroad. Ledeen argues that this religious element, this fear of God, is needed for discipline of those who may be hesitant to sacrifice their lives for the good of the spectacular state. He explains in eerie terms, quote, dying for one's country doesn't come naturally. Modern armies raised from the populace must be inspired, motivated, indoctrinated. Religion is central to the military enterprise, for men are more likely to risk their lives if they believe they will be rewarded forever after for serving their country, close quote. This is an admonition that might just as well have been given by Osama bin Laden in rallying his troops to sacrifice their lives to kill the invading infidels, as by our intellectuals at AEI who greatly influence our foreign policy. Neocons, anxious for the U.S. to use force to realign the boundaries and change regimes in the Middle East, clearly understand the benefit of a galvanizing and emotional event to rally the people to their cause. Without a special event, they realize the difficulty in selling their policies of preemptive war where our own military personnel would be killed. Whether it was the Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, the Gulf of Tonkin, or the Maine, all served their purpose in promoting a war that was sought by our leaders. Quote, Ledeen writes of a fortuitous event. He wrote this in 1999. He says, of course, we can always get lucky. Stunning events from outside can providentially awaken the enterprise from its growing torpor and demonstrate the need for reversal, as the devastating Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor so effectively aroused the U.S. from its soothing dreams of permanent neutrality. Amazingly, Ledeen is here calling Pearl Harbor a lucky event. The Project for a New American Century, as recently as September 2000, likewise foresaw the need for a Pearl Harbor event that would galvanize the American people to support their ambitious plans to ensure political and economic domination of the world while strangling any potential rival.
Okay, so what do you think he's talking about here? The Pearl Harbor level event, right? We all know what that is. It was what had just happened in America. So he's talking about this philosophy that leading up to that people had. Hey, Victor, how you doing, man? Welcome. The little hats of both sides for millenniums. The little hats have financed both sides of war for millenniums. Yeah, definitely.
Recognizing a need for a Pearl Harbor event and referring to Pearl Harbor as being lucky are not identical to support and knowledge of such an event. But this sympathy for a galvanizing event, as 9/11 turned out to be, was used to promote an agenda that strict constitutionalists and devotees of the founders of this nation find appalling, is indeed disturbing. After 9/11, Rumsfeld and others argued for an immediate attack on Iraq, even though it was not implicated in the 9/11 attacks. The fact that neoconservatives ridicule those who firmly believe that U.S. interests in world peace would best be served by a policy of neutrality and avoiding foreign entanglements should not go unchallenged. Not to do so is to condone their grandiose plans for an American world hegemony. The current attention given neocons is usually done in the context of foreign policy. But there's more to what's going on today than just the tremendous influence the neocons have on our new policy of preemptive war with a goal of empire. Our government is now being moved by several ideas that come together in what I call neoconism. The foreign policy is being openly debated, even if its implications are not fully understood by many who support it. Washington is now driven by old views brought together in a new package. We know those who lead us, both in the administration and in the Congress, show no appetite to challenge the tax or monetary systems that do so much damage to our economy. The IRS and the Federal Reserve are off limits for criticism or reform. There's no resistance to spending, either domestic or foreign. Debt is not seen as a problem. The supply-siders won on this issue, and now many conservatives readily endorse deficit spending. There's no serious opposition to expanding the welfare state with rapid growth of the education, agriculture, and medical care bureaucracies. Support for labor unions and protectionism are not uncommon. Civil liberties are easily sacrificed in the post-9/11 atmosphere prevailing in Washington. Privacy issues are of little concern except for a few members of Congress. Foreign aid and internationalism, in spite of some healthy criticism of the UN and growing concerns for our national sovereignty, are championed on both sides of the aisle. Lip service is given to the free market and free trade, yet the entire economy is run by special interest legislation favoring big business, big labor, and especially big money. Instead of the end of history, we are now experiencing the end of a vocal limited government movement in our nation's capital. While most conservatives no longer defend balanced budgets and reduce spending, most liberals have grown lazy in defending civil liberties and are now approving wars that we initiate. The so-called third way has arrived, and sadly, it has taken the worst of what the conservatives and the liberals have to offer. The people are less well off for it, while liberty languishes as a result. Neocons enthusiastically embrace the Department of Education and national testing. Both parties overwhelmingly support the huge commitment to a new prescription drug program. Their devotion to the new approach called compassionate conservatism has lured many conservatives into supporting programs for expanding the federal role in welfare and in church charities. The faith-based initiative is a neocon project, yet it only repackages and expands the liberal notion of welfare. The intellectuals who promoted these initiatives were neocons, but there's nothing conservative about expanding the federal government's role in welfare. The supply-siders' policy of low marginal tax rates has been incorporated into neoconism, as well as their support for easy money and generous monetary inflation. Neoconservatives are disinterested in the gold standard and even ignore the supply-siders' argument for a phony gold standard. Is it any wonder that federal government spending is growing at a rate faster than in any time in the past 35 years? Power, politics, and privilege prevail over the rule of law, liberty, justice, and peace. But it does not need to be that way. Neoconism has brought together many old ideas about how government should rule the people. It may have modernized its appeal and packaging, but authoritarian rule is authoritarian rule, regardless of the humanitarian overtones. A solution can only come after the current ideology driving our government and policies is replaced with a more positive one. In a historical context, liberty is a modern idea and must once again regain the high moral ground for civilization to advance. Restating the old justifications for war, people control, and a benevolent state will not suffice. It cannot eliminate the shortcomings that always occur when the state assumes authority over others and when the will of one nation is forced on another, whether or not it's done with good intentions. I realize that all conservatives are not neoconservatives, and all neocons don't necessarily agree on all points, which means that in spite of their tremendous influence, most members of Congress and those in the administration do not necessarily take their marching orders from the AEI or Richard Pearl. But to use this as a reason to ignore what neoconservative leaders believe, write about, and agitate for with amazing success, I might point out, would be at our own peril. This country still allows open discourse, though less every day. And we who disagree should push the discussion and expose those who drive our policies. It is getting more difficult to get fair and balanced discussion on the issues because it has become routine for the hegemons to label those who object to preemptive war and domestic surveillance as traitors, unpatriotic, and un-American. The uniformity of support for our current foreign policy by major and cable news networks should concern every American. We should all be thankful for C-SPAN and the internet. Michael Ledeen and other neoconservatives are already lobbying for war against Iran. Ladine is pretty nasty to those who call for a calmer, reasoned approach by calling those who are not ready for war cowards and appeasers of tyrants. Because some urge a less militaristic approach to dealing with Iran, he claims they are betraying America's best traditions. I wonder where he learned American history. It's obvious that Ladine doesn't consider the founders and the Constitution part of our best traditions. We were hardly encouraged by the American revolutionaries to pursue an American empire. We were, however, urged to keep the republic that they so painstakingly designed. If the neoconservatives retain control of the conservative limited government movement in Washington, the ideas once championed by the conservatives of limiting the size and scope of government will be a long forgotten dream. The believers in liberty ought not deceive themselves. Who should be satisfied? Certainly not conservatives, for there is no conservative movement left. How about liberals? Should they be satisfied? They are pleased with the centralization of education and medical programs in Washington in support of many of the administration's proposal. But none of the liberals should be pleased with the steady attack on civil liberties of all American citizens and the now accepted consensus that preemptive war for almost any reason is an acceptable policy for dealing with all the conflicts and problems of the world. In spite of the deteriorating conditions in Washington, with loss of personal liberty, a weak economy, exploding deficits, and perpetual war, followed by nation building, there are still quite a number of us who would relish the opportunity to improve things in one way or another. Certainly, a growing number of frustrated Americans from both the right and the left are getting anxious to see this Congress do a better job. But first, Congress must stop doing a bad job. We're at a point where we need a call to arms, both here in Washington and across the country. I'm not talking about firearms. Those of us who care need to raise our arms and face our palms out and begin waving and shouting, stop. Let's stop this. Enough is enough. It should include liberals, conservatives, and independents. We're all getting a bum rap from the politicians who are pushed by the polls and controlled by special interest money. One thing is certain, no matter how morally justified programs and policies seem, the ability to finance all the guns and butter being promised is limited. And those limits are becoming more apparent every day. Spending, borrowing, and printing money cannot be the road to prosperity. It hasn't worked in Japan, and it isn't working here. As a matter of fact, it's never worked any time throughout history. A point is always reached where government's planning, spending, and inflation run out of steam. Instead of these old tools reviving the economy, as they do in the early stages of economic interventionism, they eventually become the problem. Both sides of the political spectrum must one day realize that limitless government intrusion in the economy, our personal lives, and in the affairs of other nations cannot serve the best interests of America. This is not a conservative problem, nor is it a liberal problem. It's a government intrusion problem that comes from both groups, albeit for different reasons. The problems emanate from both camps who champion different programs for different reasons. The solution will come when both groups realize that it's not merely a single party problem, or just a liberal or just a conservative problem. Once enough of us decide we've had enough of all these so-called good things that the government is always promising, or more likely when the country is broke and the government is unable to fulfill its promises to the people, we can start a serious discussion on the proper role of government in a free society. Unfortunately, it will be some time before Congress gets this message that the people are demanding true reform. This requires that those responsible for today's problems are exposed and their philosophy of pervasive government intrusion is rejected. Let it not be said that no one cared, that no one objected, once it's realized that our liberties and wealth are in jeopardy. A few have, and others will continue to do so, but too many, both in and out of government, close their eyes to the issue.
Yeah, that's not the point of the speech, man. The point of the speech is to bring awareness to the problem, because you have to understand this is back in 2003. Hold on. Let me double check that again. Yeah, 2003, right? So back then, people were still ignorant to the idea about the left, the false left-right paradigm. And so the alternatives is the philosophy of liberty, making people aware, waking them up to the fact that we had been conned about the illusion of choice, about this choice that we had. We had the illusion of choice. Oh, yes. Yeah, it most certainly did, dude. You need to hang out more. It most certainly did. We wouldn't be where we are today without this speech and the effort of this man. So if you're just cutting hip to this kind of information, stick around because you'll learn a lot.
Issue of personal liberty and ignore the fact that endless borrowing to finance endless demands cannot be sustained. True prosperity can only come from a healthy economy and sound money. That can only be achieved in a free society. And I yield back the balance of my time.
All right.
Would the gentleman from Texas make one final motion?
I move that the House do now adjourn.
All right. There you go. There you go. Guys, that was exciting. You know, it really feels good to listen to the old Ron Paul stuff again. And it really ignites that feeling of liberty once again. So much has happened since then, including the fact that we actually were able to finally oust the neocons and send them back to the left. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And it doesn't mean that they don't want the same setup they used to have. In fact, they are venomous about taking it back. And if you know anything about, we just listened to what they had to say, what their philosophies are, what their core motivations are, and so on. They're not going to give up. This is generational warfare again. So they're going to try to put this back in place. I have no doubt. Go ahead and mess up. Let what we have right now get messed up and watch how fast it goes back to what we used to have. Watch how fast it goes back. It won't take long. And then my point in this, and this is where I'm going to hammer until the elections in 2024. I'm going to hammer it. This is my hill to die on. This is my fight. It's an old fight and it's back again. They will lock that party down. As sure as I was that they would run to the left once true opposition took the party, sure as I am that if they get it back, they will lock that party down and it will be a super delegate situation where the left is stuck right now. That's why the left cannot do anything but completely put one swamp monster after another and to the nomination and into that's why Hillary won when she shouldn't, right? We all know this because the super delegates are made up of governors. Bill Clinton's a super delegate. How about that? All their paid off people go ahead and decide who the hell it's going to be before the big show starts, the big show, right? And it's all a big show on the left. Now, the right was the last bastion of an attempt, an angle, a way to get in and actually secure the seat of power, right? It was the last one. And Ron Paul, for 2 different runs, tried to do that. Someone says it wasn't important and nothing happened. They don't have this information, right? They're looking at it today. Oh, it didn't do anything. Well, yeah, it did. It sprung MAGA. You don't think MAGA is full of Ron Paul supporters? The Ron Paul revolution? It's full to the brim. To the brim, dude. Absolute brim. Yeah, we were the ones who got out there. We were the ones who actually said, if it wasn't for what Ron Paul did, people like Bernie Sanders would have never had the support that they did. All that rallying power, all that stuff, that's the Ron Paul revolution. Grassroots, that's Ron Paul revolution, right? That was all us doing that. The fight, they tried to do the same thing. And they, one way that I convinced a lot of people to come over to the Trump side on the second go around was by predicting and the first go around was by predicting exactly what would happen to Bernie Sanders. I predicted it because I'd already gone through it with Ron Paul. I was like, you're going to get to the very end and he's going to take a knee and send all of his supporters right over to the establishment after claiming he was an anti-establishment candidate for the entire time, right? The entire time. And if people don't think this is important, I'm telling you, this is the last inlet to the seat of power. It will be taken away if we do not stick to our guns on this. And you know what we got right now? We know what we got right now. Okay. What we don't know is if other people start getting involved, what that's going to mean, who's going to come behind them. And as we get closer to the election, we will talk about how to identify, and we will identify together who the true anti-establishment candidates are, so that then we can make a decision about them. Is DeSantis for real? Is the Kennedy guy for real, right? Are they just saying the right things? We're going to find out, because I know how to identify them, and I'll show you how to do it if you don't as well. So what I sent out a link, right? And the chat is pinned to the top. And what this is, let me scoot this on over here so we can display it, is a good rundown, because, some of you might have seen that for the first time and it went by, and, political speeches can be, a little bit dry sometimes, right? But hopefully that inspired a lot of people to want to learn more. I sent out a link, and this is what it is. It's a link to this Source Watch page. And on here, you can see it'll go over what the definition of a neocon is, the origins of the neocons, the neocon forums and advocates, and so on. And this is back in the day, right? I don't know when the last time was updated, if it needs to be updated, whatever. But if you want a good read and you want to drill down and really understand this is your homework right here, and this is your resource. So make sure you click that link and you bookmark it so you can go back. It has all these different links where you can go and you can explore this topic to the fullest, right? Go check me out. Make sure I'm telling you the truth, man, because I made it a mission to understand this topic extremely well at the time, because I knew that this is where the fight started. It started right here. We had to convince people that there was an alternative out there, and that was a liberty-minded, or the Liberty faction, as it's known now, a liberty-minded candidate on the right. And Ron Paul would have been a great president, although what we learned from his run was that it took more than just being a great guy and knowing what the hell's up and being truthful to win, right? Absolutely. So please do this. Don't deny yourself this, because it will make you a more keen debater, and it will make you a more informed voter. And I tell you that this is one of the most important things that's going to come out of 2024. If we lose that GOP, it's going to be bad news. Now, what I'd like to do right now is I'll pull this back. Hello, I'm back. I'll pull this back up, and please hang out with me here, because I'm telling you, this is one of the most important topics that are out there. And we'll go through a little bit about how these people came into power, right? Now, what I did to understand this was I started looking at the administrations of presidents during this time. If you notice this, okay, go back and look at the Nixon administration, right? You see who he had under him. This was the very first infiltration of the neocons to the right under Nixon, okay? And then they came in full blown under Reagan, believe it or not. As much as he is revered, and as much as he was trying to do the right thing at the time, he again, kind of like with what we saw, not so much with Trump in that sense, but still, the swamp, right? We call the swamp. A lot of these guys that we're talking about came in under with Bush as his vice president, and came into the administration, and Reagan, not being as sophisticated, allowed a lot of them to come in and bought the rhetoric, right? So that's what I'm talking about. The new school will try to do this at some point. You get another Jeb Bush or somebody like that in there that's apparently right out with the establishment, the neocons, the rhinos, whatever. They'll come rushing back in, and they'll lock that party down for good. So what I'm going to read to you now is an article that I wrote on March 3rd, 2011. Okay, it's called the Paradigm article for some reason. I just read it like that. I want you to listen to what I was talking about and what I had to say on this topic. Okay, it starts like this: step outside the old influence and bring down the neo-establishment, left-right paradigm, false left-right paradigm by doing what they work so hard to prevent. Unite. I'm still banging that drum, aren't I? Whatever preconceptions you have or differences you believe exist between you and your fellow American citizens, and vote with who brings integrity. Exists between you and your fellow American citizens. Vote with who brings integrity and principle in 2012. And I'm going to say that again for 2024. There is no true left or right like the media would have you believe. It's the establishment versus the anti-establishment. Ladies and gentlemen, March 3rd, 2011. What have I been saying since I showed up here, right? It's the establishment versus the anti-establishment, or the rest of us, right? Which side are you on? Take the test. If you believe that Bush, Cheney, Obama, Clinton, and cohorts portray the ideal image of leadership, and that candidates of known association and that shared membership in the same secret committees, they do will miraculously act any differently, you're voting for the establishment. If you vote one way despite the other, you're voting for the establishment. If you vote for a candidate that believes that there is a realistic way to resolve our country's root cause issues that does not involve the eventual dismantling of the Federal Reserve and implementing of a new monetary policy, you're voting for the establishment. And that's deep down. That's deeper down than the corruption. That's getting into monetary policy, which we'll talk about on the back end here. If you would vote to elect a person based solely on soft issues like abortion and gay rights, you're voting for the establishment. If you're in favor of electing leadership that circumvents the Constitution when designing laws, that promotes non-American institutions and ideologies, and allows and participates in the abuse of public information and media, you're voting for the establishment. If you vote for the party without considering the candidate's historical associations, voting record, lobby partnerships, sponsorships, and reputation for demonstrating integrity, honesty, and morality, you're voting for the establishment. Now, just understand the true nature of the setup. And if it's not constitutional, then it's not American. Question the person who promotes ideas that are unconstitutional as if your country depended on it. And be accountable now rather than later. This method is to pull you in the direction with an emotional trigger. This method is to pull you in the direction with an emotional trigger issue to the point you don't see the intention any longer and lose objectivity and empathy for your fellow citizens. The objective is to divide the country and to turn us into them one way or another. When you take the power out of their hands, you stop the madness. That's it. One thing that was misleading. Let's see. I went into a different thing here. So yeah, that was my where do you stand test. Do you understand if you're voting for the establishment or voting for the anti-establishment? That was where I was back in 2011. Now I might do an update to that, right? But that's where I was back then. I'm talking about a response to an article here. And I like the way it came apart. So let's just pretend like we know what the article is. I said one thing that was missing in this article is the awakening folks have and need to come to before the election concerning the neocons. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about here is basically what awakening folks need to understand before the election. 40 plus year takeover of the GOP, and it has been that long. People are still scratching their heads as to why Bush and company acted like Democrats while in power, when the answer is pretty obvious when you look up the term neoconservative and learn the history. This is historically a group that was born in the radical left, or the Marxist left, let's call it that, or Trotskys, right? And subscribers to that same philosophy today, but now on the right, still carrying the policies of their ideological roots. Those who stayed on the left became progressives and moderates, working together with their philosophical brotherhood on the right to create a one world, a one country, a uniparty, right? A false left-right paradigm. Posing as conservatives, this group of neocons has been able to completely skew the word itself into the opposite expectation in the mind of the majority from its proper definition. Neocons are committed to the belief that the ends justify the means, which means nothing is off the table in terms of winning. This includes any dirty or deceitful practices conceivable to accomplish the mission, say hijacking the other party, and change the public's perception into what you want it to be. Philosophically founded in the corporate state power structure, the neocons have firmly allied with the military industrial complex, big energy, and big oil, for all purposes have trilateral control over all interests, creating corporate profits and national debt. These are not Republicans. I can only guess I can only guess what a true Republican looks like, speaks like, acts like Ron Paul. That's to me is what a traditional Republican should look like. Let's take a closer look real quick. If you wanted to take over a country and subvert their ideology to yours, any group whose presence would potentially derail your efforts would need to be neutralized. Okay, now we just learned that, didn't we, last week on by listening to G. Edward Griffin, right? And that is part of the strategy to neutralize the opposition. This is before I even knew this when I was writing this, by the way. Effectively, it's favorable for determined philosophies that are bent on world control and power to infiltrate and target groups and destabilize it to the point it's no longer a threat. It's, again, before I even knew anything that we covered last week, I was writing this. It's far more effective to condition a perception of fear, deceit, betrayal, while you further your interests all at your enemy's expense. Consider what comes to mind of most Americans, maybe the world, when they hear and see the word Republican. George Bush, terror, 9/11, Iraq, oil, war, etc. Now, this is me explaining about things I hadn't yet come to understand, but I could see it. Right now, I can define it and put it on the retrospective board and show you what I mean about overriding archetypes, right? So the word Republican became an overridden archetype with these new neocon efforts, right? That's how an entire generation grew up, and that's how they view Republicans. Honestly, we still have the stain of the neoconservative movement on the word, right? That turns a ton of people off, especially college-age people, especially people who never did anything after college to educate themselves. So if the people go left, your enemy is there with corporatism, debt, welfare, social justice, and dependency entitlement thinking. If they go right, they get corporatism, debt, warfare, empire building, and class elitist thinking in the middle. In the middle, there is an infighting and division, while the country's resources are moved under the control of the global corporate dissidents, and the policy bankrupts the nation, right? So that was my thinking at the time. Finally, realize there is no left or right anymore, and the third option will eventually be presented. Will arrive conveniently as the foundation is coming apart in the hands of the implementers, who will present this plan as our saviors and our only chance to restore order and prosperity. In this new world, real or very old world, supersized and futuristic, the issues that have divided us will no longer be the source of conflict, as input allowed from outside the power structure. Inputs allowed from outside the power structure will be forbidden by design. Having already been conditioned for most of an entire lifetime for all this lifestyle, adapting to the new process will be easy in the short time, and having cleaned house of the dissidents as well as all known threats, there will be no choice for those left but to accept how things are and face the fact we went along with the plan for the new this new establishment, this new power structure. It's one thing to lose a fair fight, but there's nothing honorable about cowardly, covert tactics that manipulate truth with trust and choose greed over power over humanitarianism. The worst part may prove to be for those who never woke up in time to put up a fight. Well, as clunky as that was, I was on the right path. But where's everybody at? What are we talking about here? What's going on? Oh, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. $10 from Suzanne. Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do. So guys, I know we lost some people along the way. I guess something came up, right? But anyways, again, this will be our last dive into this topic. We're going to keep expanding on it from there, but now we have the foundation in place. So, what do you guys think? Let's talk for a minute. Somebody say something. Let's talk. I want to hear about it. Did you guys learn something today? Did everybody learn something today? What do you guys think about the fact that I was talking about this stuff a long time ago? You thought I just showed up about a year ago and started running my mouth, but I was actually really doing this stuff a long time ago. It's the truth. Sure is. I got more too. I got a lot more. But now that we've done all this, I really want to hear from you, and I want to know what you guys have to say. If it's not much, that's fine. A lot to absorb here, I know. But isn't it great hearing someone speak the truth to Congress? Way back then, knowing back in 2003, no matter what you were doing, somebody was out there fighting for you, and his name was Ron Paul. Ron Paul is a legend. Ron Paul is the father of the rebirth of liberty, and we're going to go further into his philosophy of liberty and why it's so important as it comes to solution culture. Why we have to get this education back into the minds of children and get all this woke nonsense, gender ID bull crap that's clouding up their minds and keeping them away from the truth about the world. Well, we have to get that out of there. We already know that, right? But this is what we replace it with. We get back to the basics of what makes a good person and what makes a good citizen and what makes a good country, a good civilization, a good society, one that you can feel safe in, one that you can find a healthy person to raise a family with it, one that generations can prosper in. It's not that hard. It's just that there's so much corruption going on that it's hard to fight. And some people feel like they're overpowered. They can't do anything. That's not what solution culture is about. Solution culture is about knowing that you can. The power is in your hands. And it ain't up to the government to take care of this for you. They got to do their thing. But there's really no solutions in government. There's only, as Thomas Sowell teaches us, trade-offs. The real solution comes from us. The real solution comes at the ground level when we come together and unite, as I was saying back in 2011, that we unite. And when we do that, that's when they lose their power. We remove their enablement, and then they can't move, right? If their enablement is the vehicle by which they travel and implement corruptions, and we remove that enablement, the vehicle cannot move. This is what I'm saying. And I hope you understand this. The importance here is that we maintain our progress and we never take a step backwards. That's what I worry about in this upcoming election. And I want to never let us forget what gave us this chance, what bought time, right? Because it wasn't just by chance that this happened. A lot of work and effort went into getting us this far. It was on the backs of the Ron Paul revolution that Trump was able to do what he did, right? It was on the back of that huge effort. And what the Neocons did to us during the primaries to keep him from becoming president, because he was the most popular candidate, and he would have taken that nomination had it been a fair game. What he was missing was the resources of Trump and the boldness of his speech at the time. It called for more boldness, even though Ron Paul was the most boldest speaker of the time. It took more. It took a marketer and a sales expert. It took a CEO mind to conquer, and someone who was above any kind of damage or influence, which Ron Paul was. He just didn't have the money, right? He couldn't afford to keep his name out there and fly on his own private jet to rallies, or he would have done it. The guy did countless rallies. He was doing rallies right up to the end. All right. But he can only afford to do so much. So we needed a guy with more resources and just as above and outside the establishment. And you will know a good leader. You will know the right person by his enemies, right? You will know by his enemies. And while Trump did make some mistakes his first round by thinking he could persuade bad people to turn good, I'm hoping that he's learned this lesson. But at the very least, the one thing, the most valuable thing he gives us is the GOP in safe hands. That means outside the hands of the establishment. That means out of the hands of the neocons, right? We know now, we've seen now why this is such a dangerous thing that we face, because God forbid we don't get this chance again. I don't know what the next step is. The anti-establishment movement has been about this path. It's been about getting in, getting control of the government, and then getting control of society through education and enlightenment and awakening, turning away from the lies, learning logic again, learning how to have conversations again, and so on. But much more to come. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern, Repairing History with Thomas Sowell. We're going to continue to go down the path we're going there. If I can get Gary Lamb, and if I can get in contact with him before then, I'll have him on. I want to talk to role model leadership in the Black community about our solutions and put our heads together as a working group to move forward in that effort, because that's how we solve division. You see, we're in solution culture. We're attacking on all fronts. We're learning on all fronts. And that's what's going to make us successful in the end in implementing this generational methodology of solution culture, protecting the young, protecting our minds, freeing ourselves from this cage of information, and using whatever is at our disposal to maintain it. All this and much more on this series as we keep going. We're just getting started. So much more to do here in Unveiling Reality and on the Winning Reality channel, where we are unrigging the game day by day by calling it out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this evening. Saturday night, 9 p.m., Winning Saturday night. Shizzy Wisnut on for the hippie culture review. We're going to look at the origins of the Rainbow Gathering, what's going on today with them, and we're going to talk a lot of music and a lot of good times, because that's the way it is. Very laid back, cool little topic, lots of music and pretty colors and stuff like that, right? But hey, oops, hello. Hey, I just want to let you know, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everybody that came here and stuck it out to the end with me. And I appreciate everybody that was here throughout and got something out of this. I really do appreciate everybody being in support of this channel. We're doing great things here, and get the word out. Help me get it out. Help me share this information, and let's all work on this implementation of solution culture so that we can form a better world for future generations to come. All right. Until next time, you guys, keep on winning.